Hi, I'm Reggie Turner. I'm here with Terrence Moore and Jim Miller. The FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. Gentlemen, we're back together again.
We are.
After a few weeks away. Terrence, good to see you. It's been a while, but anyway. But gentlemen, we are less than 50 days in regards to primary season, so things are heating up. First and foremost, let's jump in and let's talk a little bit about this Senate race. The latest polls to kind of couch this conversation, since Governor Hogan has jumped in the race. Governor Hogan is leading both Democratic competitors
a little bit.
By a little bit. And this two Democratic competitors are Congressman David Trone and County Executive of PG County, Angela Alsobrooks. So close races there. Trone is still leading. Alsobrooks on the Democratic side. But there has been some other polling that's come out other than what we're looking at today that show that race is tightening as well and becoming a little bit more contentious. But I'll start with you, Jim, how you see it right now.
Yeah, so number one, it's interesting to me. David Trone almost got beat for Congress, right, last time.
It was about 8.5 points.
By Neil Parrott.
Yes.
And, you know, it was a squeaker, comparatively. And now things seem to be tightening. You've got to wonder if Mr. Trone's support is waning.
I would agree. I believe, just first of all, from a Democratic Republican, I think when this race started, we felt whoever won the primaries was going to win the seat. I think with former Governor Hogan coming into this race, I believe that isn't as concrete as it once was believed. I believe it's going to probably be a bigger race after the primaries as well. We are seeing everyone get a little bit more active now between Alsobrooks as well as Trone. We've seen articles where Trone feels like he's kind of taking a victory lap and kind of coasting into this and believes he's going to win. And Alsobrooks is on the attack, pretty much trying to claw in and claw her way from behind at this time. But I also think money is being spent differently at this time as well. Yes. I believe Alsobrooks had to use her funding a little bit more strategically and spend it closer to the primaries, as Trone has been able to kind of peanut butter spread his fundings across the race, and it seems a little bit more slow and steady to the primaries than Alsobrooks, who looks a little bit more aggressive now, because I think her spending strategically makes her look that way. So I think it's a toss-up still.
What does it say to you, though, that a lot of these pollsters are just completely skipping past the primaries and saying, well, it's Trone versus Hogan. How does that work out? And we did an Alsobrooks versus Hogan too, but that's not headline. That's
But I think though in the last few weeks, especially with Trone's gaffe, if we want to call it, in regards to the disparaging language that he used during a committee meeting, it is tightening up, and there's more talk about Alsobrooks' position and kind of where she is in the race. The other thing is, to Terrence's point, Alsobrooks has not been on TV all of this time. So for many months, you've had Trone saturating the airways
Absolutely.
with ads.
I see ads for him every week.
But some of those ads are coming back to bite him now. You know, I talked about this early in the season where I would talk to friends of mine that were in PG County and Baltimore County and Baltimore City, and a lot of Trone's ads was featuring African Americans. And it was talking about prison reform and all of these things, as if that is the major issue for every African American voter. And I heard some of the stories in regards to how they were grabbing folks off the street and getting them to read a script and different things of that nature. However, after this gaffe and that disparaging language that he used, now people are looking at those ads, as I saw them at the time, and as folks that had talked to me about them, is that it was pandering to African Americans. So I just think that in this moment, he's more vulnerable, and now Alsobrooks is now on television. she is getting more national endorsements. There's more attention coming to this race because you have more from the House of Representatives are saying we would like to work with also Brooks. So that makes it interesting in regards to how this moves. I still think the advantage is still Trone, but there's a 6-week sprint for us to kind of get to that. So she has the opportunity. I know that there was a forum coming up. I believe Maryland Public Television and some groups were getting together to host a forum. Trone didn't commit to the forum, so he's not showing up, and they're canceling it. Others are saying, leave an empty chair, allow also Brooks to come and be a part of this forum and get her message out. Some folks think it was strategic on Trone's part to not give her a platform, because in Trone's marketing and his ads and everything else, he does not address also Brooks.
No.
He like as soon as Hogan jumped in the race, he addressed Hogan and MAGA extremists and all that other good stuff. But he was treating also Brooks as like, you're in my rear view, I'm not paying any attention to you. But as this thing tightens up, he's still trying to use that strategy, but it's getting harder for him to do. So it's going to be interesting to see how we move from there. T.
Yeah, because I think from the beginning, she looked like the underdog.
Absolutely.
And he treated her as such in the campaign. And you want that, like you just spoke about, even with the pollsters, they're treating her like the underdog and moving on to the next race as far as, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that Trone's going to win this race, which can be tricky and a slippery slope, depends on how you're perceiving it as well. Unfortunately, this race has come down to both race, money, and partisan politics. No policies. No promises. I can't really speak on anything that's really going to change or move the needle when any one of these candidates really get into office. If they have spoken about it, it has been kind of buried by some of the headliners and some of the clickbait that really comes with this political race right now. I think we're also underestimating how important this race is nationally as well, as we look at a couple of seats that are going to be flipping. I know we're going to have some conversation about that as well. So I believe that, going back to what you mentioned about going past this point, I think because of the national appeal to this seat and so many of these seats being vacant because of retirement across the country and what this means to the outcome of the general elections and with the presidency right now in control, I really believe that everyone's kind of looking past the primaries. And unfortunately, we've seen it time and time again that people don't come out and vote in the primaries.
No, they don't.
And which, as we can see, it's very important to do so in this moment, in this time. So I would also love to make a plea that I don't hear anybody talking about voter registration. Where's the big push for voter registration? We want more people to come out in primaries. We have to show more people how important it is to be out in the primaries and start speaking about voter registration, how important it is to vote. And I think a lot of these organizations that are clamoring to get these candidates out to speak at these forums should be doing the daily due diligence to make sure there's more people out ready to vote and can really move the needle.
Let's pause for a minute and let's go back to the David Trone gaffe.
Okay.
What is your feeling on that? Was it a gaffe? Did he just misspeak? Was it a Freudian slip?
So the word that he says he meant to say was bugaboo.
Right.
That was not the word that he said.
No.
I don't care to use the word on air.
No.
I'll just say this. That's an old word, meaning many folks of this and I haven't had the conversation with my daughters, but I would venture to say they wouldn't even know the word. So for it to even be in your vocabulary is concerning.
But at his age, is it almost inevitable that it, not necessarily in his vocabulary that he's used, but he's familiar with the word?
Of course, I mean, yes, he will be familiar based on his age, but it's concerning that it's in his vocabulary.
And even the word bugaboo being in your vocabulary seemed like pandering to me. Why are you using even that word? That word doesn't even make sense for you to be in that situation.
Like in that context,
having that conversation, using that vernacular to describe someone as you speak in an extremely professional manner, to be using that kind of language. So that's even questionable. Let's just take the word that he supposedly accidentally used, but just using the word bugaboo in reference to political tactics, and I just think it was a professional in itself right there. So we just take his gaffe out and the racial connotation of the word he did use. I don't think that word was appropriate either.
Yeah.
So, and again, he shouldn't have used it. He shouldn't have been trying to use it or trying not to use it. But I just believe it doesn't boil down to that in itself. I think if you compound it with some of the things that Reggie spoke about and some of the sentiments that people have of him pandering to African Americans, and how you look at his ads in comparison to historic ads of the number of African Americans in his ads and where he's really trying to drive his votes to, is I believe he thinks is where his weakest demographic is. And I just say the same thing as business. If you spend all your dollars trying to recruit, what are you doing to your existing? And you get a better return of really addressing your existing supporters instead of trying to recruit supporters that you don't have. And I really believe if you look at it and sit back and watch his campaign strategy, I can't see him speaking to any of his core demographic that probably have voted for him in the past, and see him really pandering to a demographic that he thought he was going to lose by having African American candidates in the race.
Yeah.
Well, Trone has made it clear publicly and privately that his goal was to divide the black vote. And how he's spending his money, how he's campaigning, and the optics of how he moves, showing that that's exactly what he's tried to do. But if you remember, I said this over a month ago when we first started talking about election coverage. The dangerous thing for Democrats, even though Trone is still favored to win, it is very important how he beats Alsobrooks. Because whether you call it a gaffe or whether you call it something deep-seated within him, there are now people that won't come home and vote for him. And, I know we're going to talk about this a little later. With Hogan's popularity and their familiarity with him, it's going to be easier for them to either sit the race out or vote for Hogan. And that's not good for Trump.
Well, and the other reality is, from a Hogan perspective, is while Trone is a U.S. congressman, he is a U.S. congressman from one district.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So he doesn't have the exposure that Governor Hogan had. Everybody in the state has an opinion on Governor Hogan. They like him or they don't like him.
Right.
And based on the polls that we saw as he was leaving office was a 70-something% approval rating among Democrats and Republicans. That's tough, man.
That is tough.
Well,
let's not tease away talking about Hogan. Let's not jump into that too heavy right now, because we have it a little bit deeper on the agenda.
Okay.
Is that fair enough?
That's fine.
So the next thing that we had on the agenda
I
to
will
talk
follow
about,
Cronkite's
it's about time, Jim, you start listening to Cronkite. But the next thing we talked about was an article from Real Clear Politics. It was the 10 most likely Senate seats to flip. And it's a rough year for Democrats from the standpoint of Democrats are defending roughly like 23 seats and Republicans are only defending 10. So Democrats are really vulnerable this election cycle. But the number one seat that is most likely to flip, and I would love to see someone that would disagree, would be West Virginia.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. With Joe Manchin not running, it's been, he's been holding it as a Democrat, but West Virginia overwhelmingly votes Republican and for Trump.
Well, but arguably, Joe Manchin is about as close to a Republican as you get with the D behind their name.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
But even Joe is a bit more moderate than the state is.
Yeah, okay, I'll buy that.
Okay? Because, again, the state overwhelmingly voted for Trump, like 65%.
Right.
Right? So.
And Joe, he's narrowly held on to his wins over his last couple of elections as well. So, I think even if he stayed in this one, he had a chance to take a loss. So I don't think this is him leaving this seat. I think is a good idea for him to kind of leave on top.
Well, he squeezed the Democrats as much as he could for his agenda for his state, right? Because his vote was always, hugely important in the Senate. So, he worked really hard for his constituents from that standpoint. Some of the other races here, from 1 to 10, we had West Virginia, we have Montana.
I want to call out, just talking about our region, on the list of the top 10 in our region, we had West Virginia at number 1.
Yep.
We had Pennsylvania with Bob Casey coming in at number 9, and
Yep.
Maryland at number 10.
Wolf Hogan. Yeah.
And that's 3 Ds that can flip to Republican out of the top 10 list and completely change what we look like in this region as
Well,
well.
and by the way, Ohio's not that far away either.
Agreed.
Which is number 3.
Three.
I believe.
Number 3
Yes.
on the list. Yes. Yeah. So there's some very, very interesting races in regards to seeing how these things are going to move. And like both sides have challenges, right?
Yes, they do.
The Democrats have challenges because there's an overwhelming feeling that Biden is too old, right? And then there's an enthusiasm gap, right, in regards to kind of he has not really sold a message that people are resonating with to vote for him. Now, in some of these states where abortion may be on the agenda, that may make it easier in those states. But in those states that it's not on, like Maryland, it leaves things more wide open.
Yeah, because you don't have to address it, no matter where you fall out as. And I would also say this: there's a different kind of Republican that can win each one of these seats as well.
It's very true.
Right? So I don't think it's as black and white as saying Republican, right? I think you have the moderate Republicans, you have the more conservative Republicans, and then I think you have this hybrid of this new Republican that has this kind of rhino appeal that's kind of been labeled as far as well. So, which I love personally. You know how I feel about
exactly
parties.
right. I like rhinos, I like dinos.
Yes.
The far right and the far left is what, in my view, disenfranchises a lot of potential voters.
Agreed.
And a lot of people, the people that, there's a friend of mine on Facebook, and she's a very nice lady, and you would never know it from talking to her personally, but the vitriol that she has against Republicans, and we're all in one basket, right?
I agree.
We're thieves and despots.
Okay.
And, that's...
Well, one of the issues with our politics, though, is that it is the extreme of both parties that overwhelmingly vote in primaries.
Well, it is. And that is why we
Yes.
get what we get.
Right.
Yep. And that is why we hear what we hear, right? Because when the media wants to market, they want to go to those that are going to give advertising dollars, which comes with clickbait, which are those who go out and vote, which are the ones that they want to hit the headlines for, because those are the ones that are listening. And we wait to the generals to see how everybody else comes out. We're also seeing overwhelming the independents are coming out right now, or that need to be swayed in one way or another right now, and where some focus lies. I wanted to be where everyone kind of blends together, where politics, and you keep to a point where every party reaches across the line on some policy one way or another, to the point where they blur the lines of where they actually stand. That's ultimate politics for me. And I hope we can get there. It seems like we're moving there in some way, where internally there's some divide amongst each of the parties, and you have some of the extremists really kind of looking to the point of being the few and being cast aside in some ways. But eventually it has to happen across the line.
It absolutely does.
But we've talked about this in previous election cycles. Maryland is one of the states that independents don't have a voice in the primary.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
There are many states where independents don't have a voice in the primary.
Right.
Right, and to ask an independent to select a party, go vote in that party, and then come back and then change, that's too much to be asking of anybody to do. And we talk about inclusion and exclusion in this country. That's a perfect example of it. Why do I have to go through more steps for my voice to be heard in this state? Because I don't want to choose a party. And I don't think until we really support independent candidates and see an independent candidate really push forward and go forward, it's going to be difficult to break down the barriers between the Republican and Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the problem is there is more divide among the two parties, I think. We talk about, in my view, and I have no statistics to back this up, but in my view, you have the middle Republicans and the middle Democrats are not near as strong as they once were. You either have the rhinos or you have the wackos, or the dinos or the wackos on the other side. I'm an equal opportunity wacko caller.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that middle is becoming disinterested in politics and losing faith in leadership because of that. And we're getting leaders put into place that only, breeds that as we get generationally, and we're seeing more young people decide not to engage in politics altogether. And, it went from my vote doesn't count to I'm not voting for anybody because none of them are for me. So that's a road to destruction in our republic, and we need to get a grasp on it and really understand that and do something about it.
Yeah.
So if you believe real clear politics, the top 10 seats, I think my numbers are correct here, confirm for me, Reggie, but 9 out of 10 of those would be Democratic losses if they all flipped.
Yep.
Yes, but in looking at the details, some of them, they were just trying to rank a list, but there wasn't any real strong conviction. For instance, like Arizona, that's open, but Carrie Lake has been a controversial figure.
Right.
And there's really not a sense at this point that she is going to be able to mount a campaign that's going to grasp that seat. But it is one that they do have on the list.
Like Ted Cruz is, I think, the only one that made the list in Texas right now.
Correct.
The only Republican at risk. And I believe some of this is open seats that are happening because of retirement and what may be changing in the demographic of those states. The other one is what the influence looks like on those who align themselves with Trump or align themselves heavily with Biden as they come into these races as well. And then it's the antics of some of the people who are running for re-election and whether people are tired and fed up of them in those positions of leadership. So I think it can sway different ways based on the states that are in question.
Texas is going to tell us a lot too, right, from a national perspective, because Cruz has been closer and closer to losing. And in this situation, if that seat does flip, then that'll say something about the national mood of the country if he did lose. But if that gap continues to shrink more and he barely squeaks by, that's telling you a lot about Texas.
Yeah.
In regards to how demographics are changing in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Texas is turning blue.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is they are. I want to say one thing, and it was in response to a comment you made about a lot of people saying that President Biden is too old to run again, which, by the way, I agree with. I had an opportunity this past week. I found something on YouTube that was a speech that he gave probably 8 or so years ago. And the difference is, and whether, if you don't like Joe Biden because of his politics, I'm fine with that. Joe, in my opinion, was he was not on the extreme left, in my opinion.
Right.
He was espousing a theory that the Republicans hate, but as a rhino, I didn't mind at all. He was articulate. I know he's always been known for his gaffes.
Right. He wasn't always polished. Right.
But he was articulate. He had his facts. He was engaging. He was a good presidential candidate. The problem is that life is catching up with him. His health is catching up with him.
I think, in all fairness, though, the health is catching up with them both.
Oh, absolutely. But more so with President Biden at this point. If it's strictly a health issue,
Right.
there's no question.
I just think it's a sad state of affairs that over 300 million people in this country, and these are the two candidates we're left with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say this, Father Time is undefeated, right? We all get to that point, and we all get to that point.
Except for with LeBron James. But continue.
But he's starting to lose that as well. Let's be honest. Right? I'm just saying.
Watch your mouth. Continue.
But we also have to take into consideration how that position ages a person. And we've seen it throughout the years. And we've seen it age him as a vice president, age him in a way when he had to step away and really deal with some tragedy in his life at the same time, and then come back into this position and deal with the world as it was post-COVID coming into this position again. And let's not forget, when he came into the position originally, he was coming in off the tail end of a major, or in the midst of a major housing crisis, economically, what we were going through as well. And I believe he was probably one of the most active vice presidents I've seen for some time as well, and between the relationship him and President Obama at that time. So I think a lot of that has taken its toll, and because of that, and his tenure that he's been in politics, it's an easy comparison to look at where he is now and where he once was, versus not just even in his prime. I think just where he once was, maybe 8 to 12 years ago. Yeah. And because of that, it's difficult to watch right now.
It is.
And,
it is.
And we see a new generation of voters coming in. We know we're at the height of baby boomers right now as well. So I just think looking through the lens and being where we at with social media, where everything you do is caught and critiqued, it's hard to watch him lead at this point and not think that he may not be at the highest level of competency to do it.
Well, and the problem, I don't, and that's my thing. I don't see it out of either one of them.
Okay, and I'm not disagreeing that point.
Yeah.
But I will say that I think it's more evident with President Biden. President Trump can still get up and make a speech that is coherent. It may not be what most people want to hear, but it's coherent.
It's not coherent.
It's not coherent.
Comparatively, it is.
Just because you're loud and active don't mean it's coherent. He's all over the place sometimes.
The problem that I have specifically is I have had so many of my Democratic friends proactively say, yes, he is declining. Yes, there are issues, but he has this team around him of people to run the country. But nobody elected that team.
Right.
They elected him.
Well, we did elect that team.
No, we didn't.
We entrusted him to put a team together to run our country.
But at the end of the day, there's got to be the guy, the lady, the person.
Right.
The other side of it is that he would not be the first president we've had with diminishing capacity that has run our country.
Oh, I can't speak to that. I'm quite confident you're correct. But not in my lifetime, or at least not that I remember in my lifetime, or maybe I do.
You don't remember President Reagan?
I was good. Yeah.
like, come on, Jim.
Okay.
I think that was in your lifetime.
But that was President Reagan. That was at the end of his presidency.
No, and I think the interesting point of this is he's campaigning in his presidency. I think when we recognize a lot of the decline, they were in the midst of or at the tail end of. So I just think that going into this public broad election, I don't believe there's a high level of competency on either side right now for different reasons, right? And I'll be honest, with all due respect to the president, I wouldn't be surprised if either one of them didn't show up to the podium one day without their pants. I'm just saying, like it just doesn't instill confidence in me right now. And it's not just about their age, because I believe are people that are competent at that age, Warren Buffett, right, that I think can really do a great job. So I'm not about their age. It's just about their competency and where they've been through and their expertise and their experience to lead us to where we need to go at this point in time.
I think if we shift and we really look at the landscape, because this is it for these two gentlemen, right? This is their last heavyweight fight, right? But the test of the nation, and I believe the most pivotal race, is our Senate race. Because if there is going to be a shift from MAGA or Trump, Hogan is the test case to say, can we get back to some type of moderate governance?
Yes, he is. And he's got a lot of support for that kind of approach. He was very strategic and very smart in the things he did in Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If he just didn't break out the veto pen for everything he didn't like. He let some things go in. He didn't sign them, but he let them become law, even though he may not have been 100% in support of them.
I know that as soon as he announced they wanted to hang abortion around his neck, because he said, his stance was always it was settled law. Well, then it became unsettled law, right?
But didn't you say we was going to get into Hogan a little bit later?
No, this is the
is
point
where
where
now
we're
we
getting
get
to
to
Hogan.
Hogan
This
round?
that
I'm
was a
just saying.
that was a transition.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Okay, now I know
all
where
right.
we at.
Well, thank goodness, because we're already 30 minutes into the
That's
show.
what I'm saying.
Well, let's throw it back to Cronkite on this. Okay. So, but within this, I mean, here's the fascinating thing. Just even from a favorability standpoint, his favorability in the state of Maryland is 64%. Trone's is 33%. Also Brooks is 26% among registered voters.
Well, and also Brooke suffers from the fact that not being known, because the only place.
Not being known, and she has problems in her own community in regards to Prince George's County that we talked about. And the other thing in regards, and I know we're to talk about Trone, but in regards to Also Brooks was very strategic when she's kind of looked at this campaign and she said, Washington County, Allegheny County, Garrett County, sorry, I don't have resources or time to get to you. The furthest that she has been to Frederick.
Yep.
And she's been to Frederick probably 3 times.
Okay,
since she
let's
started.
cut to the chase here. It's time for the first wager of the 2024 election.
Whoa. I don't have my calculator.
I don't care.
You
don't
want me
need
to
the
wing you
calculator.
without my calculator?
Yeah.
Let's do
He has a
this.
computer and a cell
There you
phone on
go.
in front of him, and he's
But
looking
it's a
for
special
calculator.
calculator. You saw how accurate I was last cycle.
Well, let's
All
go get
right,
your advocates while you're at it.
Jim.
Who's willing to bet against me to say that Larry Hogan is the next senator for the state of Maryland?
Okay, today, it's in the margin of error as of today.
Are you willing to bet? Are you willing to put a steak dinner on
I'm
this?
not willing. No, I'm not. No, because this is still fluid.
Okay.
I'm
So
just
you
telling
wanna-
you where the numbers are right now.
So let's just be
Right
clear
now,
here.
it's still lean Trone.
Cronkite will tell you what's going to happen, but only minutes before it happens.
Exactly.
Wow.
He doesn't know what a wager is and the risk that is associated with making a wager right now. So he
Yeah.
wants to wait till he's
The general election is not until November. I
Right.
am still analyzing data.
Right.
The calculator, I just fired it back up with new batteries.
Oh, good
So
Lord.
it is going to take a little time for us to get there.
With the knowledge you have right now, Turner.
I said lean
Who wins?
Trone.
Trone,
I'm lean
okay.
Trone.
I am
Within
all
a
in.
margin of error. It's not a bet yet. I'm telling you where it is today.
Okay, that's fine. I'm
But
all
by
in.
the
Hogan.
time we get to October,
I'm all in.
I will
Hogan.
be pounding. You're all in Hogan.
Yeah, where are you, T?
I'm giving a slight edge to Hogan on this one, where I stand right now, based on the information I have right now, based on what his strategic moves after leaving office and separating himself. I think there's going to be that Republican wave that's going to hit, as we can see in some of these numbers, and I think he's the kind of Republican that a lot of people are going to gravitate to.
Yes, I think so too.
I agree with everything you guys are saying.
He is the Joe Manchin of Maryland.
I just feel like it's too early. It's too early for me to lean all the way in. I need to see a little bit more before I lean all the way in.
He's got another mouth to feed, so he can't afford to lose a bet. All right. Take us out. We need to go to the next segment.
All right, fair enough. Stay with us. We'll have more election coverage after the break. Welcome back to the show. Gentlemen, the other federal race we need to talk about is Congressional District 6. Still quite a number of candidates that are in this race, although there has been some consolidation since we spoke last in regards to this race. Jim, I'm pulling up the list, but I'm going to come to you first. Let's hone in on the Democratic side.
Okay. So George Gluck just wants to get his message out. I don't think he ever expects to win or get past the primary. But I can't tell you the number of times.
And George Gluck came to Hagerstown for the 5K recently, which is pretty cool.
And George Gluck comes to every congressional forum
Absolutely, he does.
that is in Hagerstown. So that's good for George Gluck. Jeffrey Grammer, I don't know a whole lot about
Well,
him.
you don't need to at this point. Jeffrey Grammer got out of the race and endorsed April Delaney.
That's true. I forgot about that. Leslie Lopez.
Leslie Lopez, legislator from Montgomery County.
Yeah.
She's in the race. She's been to recent forums.
I don't think she's got a
throughout
shot.
the Western Maryland. No, she doesn't have a shot, but I think that she will be in the top 5.
Ashwani Jain.
Ashwati James served in the Obama administration. He's running a campaign that's crowdsourced, trying to prove that you don't have to raise a lot of money. His campaign is powered on volunteers. He has been he has worked the district, I can say that. And I've seen his signs in some of the most obscure places.
Yeah.
So I'm really fascinated to see how he does without the money and how the volunteers really played into his campaign.
And that's 100% of his events have been at no charge.
Right.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's
an interesting case study. But in a rural district like this without really defined media, like maybe that can work. So I don't know. I don't see him as a front runner. I do see him top 5. I see him top 3 in regards to this race. But it's going to be interesting to see like his strategy and how it plays, because it may be a new way to get it done, especially in a rural district like this one.
Well, I believe social media has been somewhat of a
Equalizer.
and getting candidates to be out there and not need as much dollars. But I honestly, I like to see that, just kind of to get on that point, because if I want to hear what kind of policies that are being, that the candidate that I want to represent me, I shouldn't have to pay to hear it to a certain
that's
extent.
exactly right. That just bothers me.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That just bothers me to no end, that if you want to see these candidates that want a job from you in person, you got to pay $100, $250, $500.
Yeah.
I had to pay a lot more than that to go to Mar-a-Lago, but we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, what?
Imagine any other job. If you wanted a job and you were interviewing for it, and when they tell you your interview is going to be next week, and you said, "Well, send me $100 and I'll show up for my interview." like, it's a little odd, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
So Leslie Lopez.
We talked about
Oh yeah,
her.
that's right. Takesha Martinez.
Yes, Mayor Martinez is still in the race.
Not a shot.
There you go.
Yeah, I have nothing against Takesha. I really don't. And one of the things that we're going to cover here probably next week is the notion of she has the approach of I'm the working class kind of person. And one of the things we're working on as a story is the working class underrepresented in government as legislators? Are they underrepresented at the legislative table? And I think there's an argument to be made, probably on both sides, but certainly that's the case. And Takesha, I think, has done well. She's done great with fundraising. I think that for any number of reasons, not the least of which is our next candidate, April McLean Delaney,
Yes.
I
don't think this is the year for Takesha.
Yeah, I struggle. I respect and support her agenda, her women's agenda, but it seems to be her only agenda. And I think that when you're running for representation, to cut off almost 50% of your demographic in support of your agenda, and not have an agenda that supports everyone, as well as drives home to some specific points of your agenda, and to come out and make it primarily and make statements as I'm running on a woman's agenda.
Right.
I just think that offers up some challenges. Again, I'm all for many of the topics that are up against equality and equity and women's reproduction rights. I'm all for those discussions and those agenda items, but there needs to be more. And I believe there needs to be some more substance there.
The other thing that I noticed is if you look at any articles that have been written about the race, and it's not many, right?
Right.
In regards to coverage of it. Whether that's Montgomery Perspective, there's a really insightful blog that writes, you have Maryland Matters, and a few other publications. When they identify who front runners or leading candidates are, they do so by money.
Right.
However, I think that's a little misleading because with some of these candidates, money that has been raised, much of it has went to the consultants because you're paying to raise those dollars. So money can give you a platform, like it can give you a headline, but then comes down to, do you have the money to traverse the district? Are you building volunteers that can get out to the remote parts of Western Maryland and can get to the more populated parts of the district in Montgomery County? Because if you look at the Democratic primary between Frederick and Gaithersburg, the Gaithersburg area, that is 50% of the primary electorate for Democrats. So if you don't see robust activity in those areas and sustained activity, you don't have a chance in this race. So that really does take out a number of candidates.
Right.
And and as we look at it right now today, because you went on to talk about April Delaney, she's the only candidate that's on television.
Yeah, I believe dollars have to be transitioned into votes.
Yes.
And you have to have a legitimate strategy to do so, no matter how much or how little you earn. And I think there's strategies to do both, as I said, with social media and other forms. You know what I do love? I don't see a bunch of yard signs in the streets right now. I'm not saying they won't come, but not saying they won't come, but it's showing that a lot more is being done on social media and done on other platforms. But even with Delaney in the race right now, contrary to what I said about Keisha's platform and her agenda, I'm not sure what Delaney's agenda is, other than me, right?
Her agenda seems to be me, and I'm fighting MAGA extremists and women's rights.
Right. That's very vague to
rights.
me.
Delaney, the name you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Having experience, that's great. I still want to hear more about policy change. I want to see candidates go out on a limb and tell me what they want to do or how they plan to do it, with an understanding that you can be as energetic or optimistic about what you're going to do when you get in that seat until you get in that seat and you realize that it's not as easy to influence change. But make me some commitments and tell me what you're going to be fighting for, even if you don't win the battle. I'm not hearing that. So I do give that to Takesha, but I think it was a very thin scope of what you need to be talking about versus even some that I don't know at all. Right. So I would like to see some balance somewhere in between.
And Jim, of the other candidates, several of these candidates that are on this list, like Stephen McDowell and Joel Rubin, they have long since dropped out of the race.
Right.
Lori Ann Sales, who is a first-term council person, I believe, in Montgomery County, is still in the race. But I haven't seen. I mean, she's been to events. She's been in our community. But I don't see an infrastructure with her. She obviously doesn't have name recognition outside of her community, and she hasn't raised money, right? So I don't see much there. Joe Vogel. Joe Vogel, him and Delaney have received some very prominent endorsements. I know he received Cory Booker's endorsement, who he had worked for. He had also worked for former Speaker Pelosi, but Delaney received that endorsement. So he has a little bit more of a higher profile, plus he's in Annapolis. And from a dollars and cents standpoint, there's some restrictions in regards to those that are serving in Annapolis, what they can do in regards to fundraising. Mm-hmm. But they can offset that, though, with name recognition, and you see them doing the job at a state level, so that gives them some exposure.
I want to just go back to Sales when you get a chance there. I'm sorry.
Sure. But the candidate that I would say that talks the most about policy and has the most extensive policy resume is Destiny West. She is a very impressive candidate. She just does not have money in infrastructure. Like, I think the amazing thing about her is Destiny is 36 weeks pregnant. And she is all over this district. I mean, all over it, to the standpoint of like, oh my God, if that was my wife, I would have some concern. Like, she's that close to giving birth. But reproductive rights and policy, Also in regards to affordable housing, like if you've heard her speak or you've looked at her site, she is very, very much a policy wonk. She would give Terrence the kind of the meat that he likes to have, with his dinner. But I think in other election cycles, once she builds a team and an infrastructure, she will be a great candidate. I just think it would be amazing if she could press through and win from just this grassroots campaign of her and her husband traversing the district.
But it's not going to happen.
Yeah, well.
Republicans. Oh, you want to get
No. He wants to talk about.
I did want to give some credit to sales as well as policy, because she did kind of say that she met with all 5 districts and she put together what she called her smarter framework, which is about safer, more vibrant communities, military and veterans, advanced health care, revitalizing the economy, tackling climate change, ensuring a higher quality of education, and restore reproductive rights. So she did come up with that acronym to really talk about some of the key things that she wanted to drive home. So I don't think it's as much meat on the bone, but it's at least a serving, right?
Right.
Some of the key things that she does stand
Right.
for. And it's something that's digestible that you can kind of tie yourself to
well,
with that
and
acronym.
we hope that there's some meat behind that acronym,
Right. Yes,
that
absolutely.
she can go deep on something if she needs to.
But on the Democratic side, this seems to be a 2-person race. This comes down to Joe Vogel and April Delaney.
Agreed.
Both of them have gotten high-profile endorsements. Vogel does not have as much money, but when you start talking about millennials and younger, there's a younger voter base that's really there for him. He just received the teachers union endorsement, so he has a lot of momentum. And in some of these debates, he has been not afraid to challenge Delaney.
Yeah.
Some feel it was been a little aggressive, but he's out here going after it. But I think in the way that he's challenging her, he feels like he's behind.
And it's tied not only to Generation Z, but his tie to immigration. He's building on his family history, as part of the Holocaust, and and I believe as far as migrating also from Uruguay, I think these are some of the things that he speaks to with some of that tone of being able to address one of the major issues of immigration as well.
So on the Republican side, who are your top 3?
Listen, I've said this. I don't see anybody beating Neil Parrott. Period.
Not even Dan Cox?
No. Listen, Dan Cox getting beaten as bad as he did by Governor Moore, I think leaves a bad taste in a lot of Republicans' mouths, right? Because it was like,
Well, he's far too right for many of us.
well, but he wasn't too far right in the primary when he was going against Kelly Schultz, see? And that burned the party.
Well, that's because, as we've pointed out several times on this show, only the extremes go to.
Right.
I won't say that. The extremes definitely go, but then there are others that go. Unfortunately, I think we're outnumbered.
But the thing in regards to Parrott, did he campaign last election cycle when he only lost by 9 points?
Not really.
And didn't get as many national dollars as we forecast.
No, we thought national money would come into the race, and it didn't come in.
What about Brenda Chain?
I love Brenda. I wish she would have ran for city council. I wish she would have went to city council and took one of those seats. She was one of the higher vote getters in that race, even after she had left the race and was appointed to be the delegate. I don't see.
I could have seen her strong candidate as mayor as well. I think as a mayoral seat, I
Yes,
think she could have came in and made some noise as well.
Either one of those. I just think. I wish someone could sit down on the Republican side and give me a compelling message of how you're going to beat Neil Parrott.
Yeah. What about Mariella Roca?
No.
Unfortunately, I agree. She's a very smart woman, and she has some policy type discussions, but I don't think she's got a chance.
And I think Parrott is going to get credit for how he has, number one, he was the major defendant in the lawsuit, or plaintiff in the lawsuit, in regards to the district.
Yep.
right? So, which basically brought more of rural Frederick into it, which allowed him to cut the race down. So he gets a lot of credit for fighting the gerrymandering. Again, I don't see anyone with a compelling message or enough dollars to get their name recognition out here to beat him.
Put it like this, if Mariella Roca takes it or comes close, I think it goes back to the point that I said, that we are undercounting and underrepresenting the Latino and the Hispanic vote across this area.
Yeah.
And I just see there's a swing that's happening and a swell that's happening that we're overlooking in some ways as well, in that voting population. So, and I think, and again, I'm not just putting all onus on that. I think she does have some strong policies as well there as well, but I think she also gives some hope and some inspiration to some otherwise voters that may not be coming out, that may be of the Hispanic descent.
All right, let's get on the record. Who's winning CD6 on the Democratic side? I think we already have a consensus on the Republican side. Democratic side, Jim, who you got? Let's get you on the record right here, buddy.
Oh, here we go. Democratic side, I got to go with Delaney.
Oof.
Yeah, I'm going with Delaney on this one as well. I think it's a slim margin over Vogel, but I think she walks away with this again. I just think the experience, the dollars, even how she's moving. You know, even though I don't hear the meat in her politics right now, I just think because of the work she's done in the past, her experience speaks to it.
The work, the dollars, the
I
experience, the
think-
dollars, the dollars.
I think
Who says you can't buy an election in America?
I think the advantage that she has over all the candidates is that she's the only one on television, and her ads just make it look like I'm suited for this role. I've worked.
She's got a strong presence.
Right.
Does she? Is there anything behind that? I'm not sure yet. But she's got a strong presence.
Yeah.
And I'll be very honest. I liked her. I liked John.
Right.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well,
I
that's
was a John Delaney fan.
that's the other thing that kind of rolls in the bag.
Trone
for her,
couldn't
right?
have beat Delaney,
Right.
No.
and not at all. Yeah, he had it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, take
So
us
I'm
out.
with you guys. Hold on, you didn't get me on the record.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Are we doing a steak dinner on this?
we're going to have to do percentages wins if we're all going to be on the same candidate. Okay. But we have a few more weeks until we do that, Jim.
Okay.
I got to get to the calculator.
Okay.
All right. So, but Delaney
I'm
by
trying
5.
to get a steak in the bank early.
Delaney by 5 right now. Right.
Delaney by 5. Okay. Wow.
And I got Parrott by 15.
Parrott by 15.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the primary.
All right.
Yeah, Delaney Parrott.
All right.
Yeah.
Take us out.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we have more to cover. We'll have to come back, and we left a lot of topics on the table tonight. We left a lot of meat on the bone, but we'll get there. Well, that is all the time that we have for tonight. We hope that you all follow us on Facebook, like us on Twitter, and send us your comments to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That is feedback@theflipsidetv.com. But more importantly, join us again next week for another episode of The Flip Side.